Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. In my previous video, I did a player showcase of Tom Seaver, showing off primarily my vintage baseball cards of Tom Seaver. And I mentioned that 2 years ago, when I really started focusing on collecting vintage baseball cards, in addition to Wade Boggs, of course, my goal was to collect all the Hall of Famers of a particular year, starting with 1980 and going back. Now, that type of project is a marathon, almost a lifelong collecting goal. So I have my work cut out for me. To date, I have yet to get all the Hall of Famers of a particular year. The closest I am is 1978. I'm missing just 2 cards. They're really hard to find because they're low population, and I may just have to break down and submit raw copies to get those graded. Next is probably 1979, 1980. That I'm the next closest to, and then it just goes down from there. So for me to do a video where I show off all the Hall of Famers of a particular year, those videos are a long way in the future that I'll be able to do. But in the meantime, I thought I could still show cards, the Hall of Famers that I have of a particular year, for the progress that I've made so far. So I have a decent number of 1976 Hall of Famers, so I thought I would do a video showing those cards off. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show off my 1976 Hall of Fame vintage baseball cards. Okay, before I start showing off the cards, I did want to mention 2 things. Is that the list of Hall of Famers, I'm going off the PSA registry list for the Hall of Famers for a particular year. So this could include all-star cards, league leader cards, and so on. And second, I've added some players to that list that I consider Hall of Fame worthy, such as Pete Rose, Dwight Evans, and Thurman Munson. I think those are the 3 primary players that I've also added to the list. So I'm definitely not making it easy on myself. I'm going for the complete list and then some, but it is a fun journey to try to complete these group of cards, these Hall of Famers for each year. So I'm going to start showing off the cards in numerical order, and so we're going to start with card number 19, George Brett, in a PSA 6, second year card of George Brett. And I have Gaylord Perry in a nice PSA 8. Again, I started off with, when I started my collection, I wanted to try to go for collector grade. Now, Gaylord Perry, I was able to pick up for an 8 at a reasonable price. But as I started collecting, as we started hitting these price increases during the pandemic, I started to cut back my goal of trying to get something in collector grade. So you'll find a lot of these are probably PSA 6s, but as long as they have nice centering, that's really all that matters to me now. So, all right, next is we have Dennis Eckersley's rookie card in a PSA 6. Then we have, which I showed off in my previous video, a Victory Leaders, National League Victory Leaders card of Tom Seaver and a nice PSA 7. I can get the camera to zoom. There we go. Then we have Kari Stremski in a PSA 8. Again, with Kari Stremski, for certain years, I really wanted to get a nice example of his cards. Now, of course, going back now, the ones I need from the 1960s, I'm probably willing to even look at 5s for those just because of the price point. But that's a nice PSA 8 right there. All right, now next is the Pete Rose in a PSA 6. Again, going beyond the pure just Hall of Fame list. Really like that image of Pete Rose there. Then we have his playing mate, Johnny Bench, another PSA 6. Love that image as well. Johnny Bench has some really great looking baseball cards. Topps did a great job in getting some really cool action shots of Johnny Bench for their cards. Next we have Robin Yount's second year card in a PSA 7. Then we have a Nolan Ryan. I was able to pick this up very early on when I started collecting vintage cards. So this was, I probably got this before any type of, boom that hit during the pandemic, because I don't know, I haven't looked this up. I'm not sure what 7s are going for now, but probably more than what I paid for this one. But happy to get it in the 7. Then we have Jim Rice, also in a PSA 7. Love those Red Sox hats from the 70s. And again, as I mentioned, this list of Hall of Famers includes All-Stars, League Leaders, and this one fits in it as well. The Sporting News All-Time All-Stars. This is Pie Traynor in a PSA 7. Still looking to get the Ted Williams. That's one I'm really shooting for. Shouldn't be too expensive. I just haven't picked up one yet. All right, continuing on, we have Carlton Fisk in a PSA 7. The great Rod Carew, also in a PSA 7. Raleigh Fingers, another PSA 7. Jim Palmer in a 7. Here I said a lot of my cards are probably PSA 6s, and here I'm running off a group of PSA 7s. So some of these, again, for 1976, even in a PSA 7, they're not too expensive. So if I see one I think is reasonable, I've gone ahead and bought a 7. It mainly comes down to price, what's available, and the eye appeal of the card to me. So. And next one, Mike Schmidt, also in a PSA 7. I have this card raw, and it's been part of my collection for, I've been collecting for a little over 40 years. I bet you at least 35 years. I don't know how I came about it, the card. I didn't pull it from a pack. I wasn't collecting back in 76. But it may have been in the group of cards that I got a bunch of cards from 1977 that my cousin gave me. Really wasn't interested in cards and had a stack. And I think he had some 76s in there as well. And I should have brought it out. But that card is beat to you-know-what. Creases everywhere. I don't know what the heck happened to that card, but I still kept it. Full reminder of when I first started collecting cards, but also nice to have this PSA 7 example. All right, rounding up the last group here, we have a Reggie Jackson, PSA 6. This was one where 7s at the time I was looking for this card were just, I didn't want to spend that much on this Reggie Jackson. So I found this nice example in a PSA 6. Next we have Willie McCovey. This one, again, I found not too expensive in an 8, so I decided to pick it up. Then we have my Hank Aaron PSA 6. This one took me a while to find in the condition, eye appeal, and price range that I wanted to spend. So I was really happy when I finally picked up this Hank Aaron. And as I mentioned, I'm going for any Hall of Famer that's on the list, including managers. And that includes Joe Torre. Now, this isn't a manager card. This is a playing day card of Joe Torre. He was a third baseman at the time for the Mets. But it's on the Hall of Fame list because Joe Torre was a Hall of Famer, not as a player, as a manager. But again, I'm including it on my list. So I have this example here in a PSA 7. And the last two here, again, one I showed off in my previous video, my Tom Seaver in a PSA 8. Again, wasn't necessarily looking for an 8 in this card, but I saw it at last year's National, and for the price, I thought I got it for a pretty good price for an 8 of Tom Seaver, so I decided to pick that up. But again, I wasn't necessarily looking for this card in an 8. And then finally, the last one that I have so far, it goes actually beyond the regular 1976 top set, and this may be, I have to check my checklist, but this may be the only Hall of Famer in the traded set that Topps put out in 1976, and this is Fergie Jenkins. And this one wasn't very expensive, was able to pick this one up in a PSA 8. It's when he got traded, was it from the Rangers? Yep, Texas Rangers was traded to the Red Sox. And that looks like an airbrush, if I'm not mistaken, as Topps typically did with players who recently changed teams. So there you have it. So far, my run of 1976 Hall of Famers plus a couple non-Hall of Famers. Would love to know your thoughts on my progress. The Sporting News has several Hall of Famers in it. I think maybe all the all-time All-Stars are Hall of Famers. And then like that Tom Seaver League Leaders, there are a whole bunch of League Leader cards that feature Hall of Famers. So that's on my list. So I'm not even sure if I'm halfway through the complete run of 1976 Hall of Famers, but there you go. Would love to know your thoughts, opinions, comments on my progress so far and some of the cards that I've picked up to date. That's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.